Hi everyone, welcome along to the next edition of our Precursive Perspective series. I'm delighted today to be joined by Sean from Apperio. Say hello. Sean.
Hi, yeah, nice. How you doing, Jonathan? You all right?
Yeah, good, thank you. Good. Thanks for making the time today. We're going to do a few more formal introductions in a moment, but as stated in our previous videos, really what we're looking to do here is share how some of the world's best companies and indeed some of the most innovative executives in customer success are really navigating the current, the new remote reality, as we're calling it at the moment. So I'm delighted to have Sean join us today. Sean, just to begin with, do you mind giving a little bit of an introduction to who is Apperio and then in turn what your role is there?
Sure, absolutely. So Apperio's been around since really about 2016, certainly in its current form. We still fairly early stage startup. Did our Series A in 2018. I've been with the company since summer last year, so I'm also reasonably new. But you know what it's like in startup world. No one's the new boy for very long.
Yeah.
What we do at Apperio is we're a legal spend management platform, and essentially what we do is we work with in-house legal teams and provide them a dashboard that allows them to get complete visibility of how much they're spending with their external law firms.
Cool.
And kind of the big problem that we solve is when you're dealing with law firms, you quite often you'll get access to the billed information when they send you the invoice, but quite often there'll be work that's sitting on the clock that hasn't been invoiced or billed yet, and it becomes a big challenge for in-house teams to manage the relationships with their partners and the finance teams to give them the visibility of how much is accruing in terms of the spend. And what we do is we connect up our customers' law firms and provide that visibility on both the billed information, but more importantly, that unbilled element, the work in progress stuff, to ensure that they're tracking well against budgets, that there's no surprise invoices that they're going to get down the pipe. And really, the key thing that we're trying to do is build transparency between law firms and their customers, so they can focus on providing great service and doing good work for their customers.
Very nice, very nice. Dare I say it, if I had to guess, it was founded by a former lawyer.
Funny enough, yes, it was a lawyer. So Nino, our CEO, was a lawyer at CMS, and then moved actually over to work in private equity. And when he was working in private equity, they do these big deals, and I guess they get told it'll be a $2 million for the deal, and at the end of the deal, they'll get a bill for $4 million. So that's kind of really what led to the birth of Apperio.
Okay, cool, excellent. Now, we originally connected when I saw you speak at Gainsight's Pulse conference. So the name Sean Smith, dare I say, is pretty well known in the customer success community in Europe. Bit of a plug there. But can you give us a little bit of a background to prior to Apperio, some of the things you've done before, because it's an impressive resume, I'd say.
Yeah, certainly. So I've been working, I guess, in B2B startups for pretty much most of my working career. The last sort of 8 years have been very much focused in startups going from sort of early stage through to sort of Series D, Series E. So I was previously at a company called Brandwatch, which is a social media analytics platform, and I headed up their EMEA account management team, and then we moved that team into a customer success team, and then after that I joined another company called PatSnap, which is an intellectual property analytics platform. That's where we first started working with you guys with task fees, and we put that in place there. And there I was leading the customer success side of the business. So everything from our customer success managers through to product support, through to onboarding team and professional services teams.
Cool, excellent. So we're going to dig into some of that experience, because you've got a wealth of good experience, and I think a uniquely talented way of articulating things that I like. So, I mean, we're all kind of personally and professionally dealing with a very unusual and challenging situation, right? And I think through that lens, it would be interesting, you know, for me and for others to hear about kind of what are some of the things you guys are seeing in terms of how you're dealing with this. Just to begin with, sort of for the business internally at Apperio, talk to us a little bit about kind of making that transition into, you know, you guys worked all in an office together, I think, before. How's that transition been to now the remote environment?
Yeah, so it's we I think we've got you know, we benefit, I'm sure, like a lot of SaaS businesses, from being effectively based. Pretty much everything that we use, apart from the printers and the meeting rooms, is based in the cloud.
Wow.
So when we were aware of the fact that there was likely for this stuff to come down down the road, we ran a trial day where everyone worked from home for the day, and just to kind of keep the tires around everything.
Yeah.
You know, it's for us, it's been a pretty smooth transition, and really the stuff that's been challenging, that's been missed, is just the fundamentals of the culture. How do you maintain the culture when you're remote, and how do you know, when you can't, how do you make sure that you're working in a way that you know, when you can't turn around to just tap somebody on the shoulder to ask them a question?
Yeah.
How do you ensure that you're keeping dialogues going? So we've been kind of working hard to make sure that we're adapting to that from an internal team perspective.
Yeah.
From our clients, our customers, and the law firms that we're working with, there's been, I think we've been quite lucky, I think, compared to perhaps some of the other companies out there in from a customer success perspective, in that partly because what we're doing is very much tied to tracking spend, and that's a critical thing that companies are trying to do at the moment.
Yeah.
And the fact that we tend to work with large companies that you know, their legal work's not going away, so they need to have visibility of that. So on the whole, our customers haven't, apart from the move to remote working, our customers have not seen too much disruption. And we've had a few customers that have asked for us to just adjust payment terms, just to help them manage their cash flow, and that's partly down to the, you know, just challenges they're facing around things like their supply chains are being impacted and so on. But actually, it's been refreshing in for us that we, when this first happened, you know, immediately when you're working in customer success, you start to want to worry about where the risk is and where that risk is coming from.
Yeah.
And very quickly, I think, from speaking with our customers and just seeing where they are, is there was a transition to remote working, but on the whole, you know, things have generally been business as usual. And I don't think in any of our forecasting we are in a position of kind of adding too much additional risk off the back of this environment. So I know that we're probably very lucky, and we're probably reasonably unique compared to some of the other companies out there in being in that situation.
Yeah. I mean, being lucky is one thing, but, you know, fundamentally from a society perspective, if there's a business that is in good health, and you know, that's good for your staff and all of the you know, the family and network around the people in the business. So, you know, we've got to draw the positives, right? I think so you touch on something there around, you know, how in customer success, like, risk is often something that people gravitate towards. What do you think why is customer success important at the moment? And is there actually now an opportunity? So, two-part question, which you should never do when you're interviewing people, but why is customer success important? And do you think that there's an opportunity for customer success to think about opportunity rather than risk?
Yeah. So the stuff that the customer success at the end of the day is that I think if we look broadly across the different, my peers in out there in customer success, it's at times like this where the ability to focus on in many ways in terms of putting the customer first is the stuff that you do now and the way that your customers will view how you helped or how you responded to the crisis, to the situation, will pay off in considerable multiples down the line. It will have it's the kind of things that people will remember, how you helped and supported them during the time of crisis, that will benefit your organization. And the ability to be sympathetic and understanding of your customers, to respond quickly and support them, and give them the confidence that with anything else going on, as long as they can rely on what you're doing and the team that you have within customer success to support and help them and help drive value within their organizations, is the kind of stuff that actually will play well down the line. And that ties into the opportunity side, because there's an opportunity for you to become trusted partners with your customers, which is always, it should be an ambition of the customer success team. We don't want to be seen as just a vendor that's there to be negotiated with on kind of very tactical measures. You want to be seen as a business that's really partnering with your customers. And these times like this gives you the opportunity to do that. And from an opportunity perspective, there's the long-term opportunity that comes from doing that, which is both, those knowing that you were there to help them out at a time of crisis, and will help out when it comes to future contract negotiations and renewals and so on. But then secondly, it's dangerous to kind of try and be too commercial in these circumstances and going in and selling products. But if you've got opportunities to talk to your customers about ways that you can help other problems they may be facing and reduce needs, and whether this is down from kind of coming in and providing additional services that's going to allow them to focus on dealing with other things within their business, or whether it's providing them with additional product functionality that's going to take their minds away from having to worry about whether an invoice gets processed and so on, those kind of things. You should be sensible about doing that, but you should also be measured and sensitive in terms of the approach and the manner that you take when doing so.
Cool. Well, it's nice to hear you validate something that actually we've been doing at Precursive, which is you're aware of the survey that we run every year, the customer onboarding benchmark survey. This is the third year. And one of the things we did this year when we could see this situation emerging was we said, well, look, we've got all this data. We've got a wealth of data from before. We can actually start to benchmark different companies. We're not charging for it. And we've had a massive take up of that, because, both customers are using that, but, sometimes companies are not in a position to buy software, but they're in a position to use software or use insight. And so if there's a way that you can get them either one of the two at this point in time, as you say, kind of the brand equity that builds for you longer term is really important. Part of what you and I have talked about before is the importance of communications, and in particular the quality of communications. Maybe for some, our audience out there, kind of, could you share kind of how you think about communications right now and what you're advising the team on in how they communicate with customers, please?
Yeah, so the one of the things with communication is within at this point is something that we've considered not just within customer success but across the entire company. It's the marketing teams, the sales teams, the operational teams, and so on. All of those teams are going to be speaking with both existing customers and potential customers. And so we've worked with our marketing team to put some very clear messaging guidelines to ensure that we're being sensitive to the situation, that we're being seen to acknowledge the situations. So broadly, we've kind of worked to put those in place, and there's guidelines around the types of language to use. We've put together some structure around template suggestions, email templates that can be used for when contacting people. Yeah. The guidance specifically within customer success is is the stuff that we kind of are trying to make sure that we're doing is when doing outreach is to obviously reach out and check and see how people are impacted. Be cognizant that people might not necessarily have the ability to have the same availability they may have had previously. So a lot of it is just kind of making sure we're checking in a clear manner if that we're not putting we're not being perceived as putting in pressure or trying to ferry people into pathways that are beneficial to us but not necessarily reflective of what the client wants to do. And the big thing is that we've built into, when we are speaking with our customers, is spending time at the beginning of every call to do that check-in and understand what impact this is having, and we're trying to do that on two levels. One is like, how how the company's adjusting to the move and how everyone's moving on, and then understanding the bigger picture of how is this how is this changing the company's direction, approach, and strategy at this point, because we're very focused in what we do within customer success to try and understand what our organizations are driving towards and their strategy, because that allows us to then be much smarter about the ways that we can play the value that we deliver into those organizations and make sure that we're aligned with the same objectives within the business. And these kind of circumstances are obviously leading to companies to very quickly reevaluate and have changes to strategy that potentially are moving very, very, very quickly. And so we try and make sure that we're spending time to understand that, and to also help the customers understand that it's business as usual for us. Nothing's changed. The functionality were there and as well. And we're also very wary of not wanting to be seen that we're like trying to turn this into an opportunity in terms of leveraging that. There's been obviously
some others could do with learning from that, right? If you're getting some of the emails that I'm getting right now.
I'm sure we've all
some of the stuff
got plenty of those at the moment. So I think being aware of those things, and I think the important thing as well is with the team is it's important that we the members of the CS team are obviously always driven through with the notion that they need to be accountable for what they're doing, and they need to be focused on driving outcomes within their customers' organizations. And for example, the onboarding team, we want to make sure that we're getting customers on board and we're getting their law firms connected as quickly as possible. So we're pushing pressures on that, but at the same time, it's being clear that this is not the time for us to kind of go hard on somebody if we feel that they're not meeting those numbers because of their circumstances out of their control, and to make sure they understand that they have to be sensible about doing that and not to push when it's not appropriate to push.
Okay, cool. So there's a couple of key themes coming out of what we've talked about so far. I think one is being very cognizant of maintaining your culture and doing the right types of things to enable that in a remote environment. And then secondly, the importance of what I would describe, and you've called it before, I think, sensitive communications, right? So kind of culture and communications, two big facets of CS. Let's talk a little bit about some, I think, tactics that are useful just in CS in general. One of the things we've talked about before is like these, how you structure a narrative, or the importance of narratives that you're having with customers, and how you approach setting that up and executing it. Can you, for those of you that might not be aware of this approach, can you talk us through a little bit about what you mean by that?
Sure. So I think one of the things that I think you see quite a lot in customer success is that there's very much focus on actions and activities, and you'll get a lot of talking about the playbooks for different scenarios, and it tends to be like do this, reach out this, make sure you're speaking with your executive sponsor, make sure you've had contact and outreach, check they're having platforms, look at your leading indicators, and so on. And I think fundamentally that there's a trap that you can fall into by following that approach, is that you think you're doing a good job because you're ticking boxes, and you're kind of spoken to the exec sponsor, I've done this, I've done that, we've reached out and we've sent them this piece of content, and they've logged into the platform so many times. And And then you can get blindsided at the point of renewal where they turn around and say to you, well, look, I know we've done a lot of work with you guys, but unfortunately we've gone with a competitor. We've just not found value in the platform.
Yeah.
And so for us, very much the approach that we try and take is that all of that stuff is important. It's always going to be part of the playbook, but it has to be related into a bigger narrative that you're trying to drive with your customers. Mm-hmm. So it's why we have a focus on trying to understand our customers' organizations. So we spend a lot of work and time in terms of working with our teams to do that piece of discovery at the beginning of a relationship, and understand our stakeholders and be curious and ask those questions so we can really understand how things work. And we tend to kind of, at a basic level, what we're trying to do is get to that point where if our clients can articulate and ideally get excited about the strategy that they are pursuing within their organization, and then we can then understand the business objectives that the stakeholders that we're working with are trying to achieve, and how that relates back up to the wider strategy within the organization. It then allows us to map out the tactical pieces and work that we can do to help our stakeholders achieve those business objectives. And we then drive that narrative so that when we're coming to do an executive business review, we're not saying, oh, we did, we launched this particular product, we went live with these particular law firms, we tracked this amount of spend through the platform. What we're doing is saying, we helped deliver this use case within your organization. That helped, can you confirm that helped you achieve your business objectives? And ultimately, so that's clearly helping drive the strategy within your organization. And so it's about fundamentally focusing on, are we helping that company move forwards? If we're doing all these bits and it's not doing that top stuff, then what's the point of them having us in the first place? So it's really about making sure that we're doing that, and we're not that's never something that you sit in a resting state with. You're always trying to push that things forward and understand what the next level is, and there's always ways and means that you can look at trying to push the boundaries of the impact that you're having within your customer's organization.
I mean, I think the ability to be really well organized as a customer success function or as a business, there's, if it's chaos, it's very difficult to have those types of conversations, because you need to be, ahead of demand. You need to be able to do your due diligence and your reading and preparation for engaging with customers, understand the industry that they're in, understand the business, the strategy, the goals for the individual executive or manager that you're dealing with. And it's very difficult to do that stuff well and at scale if things are poorly organized, right? And it's just you're firefighting all the time. That's, you're not going to get the opportunity to do it.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And it's I think in many ways it's such a fundamental to have your processes and to have the in check, and to understand and clearly mapped out and described, and to have the data sources that you need to rely on in place and visible and where you want. So you're not stuck asking questions along the lines of, well, when was the last time they logged into the platform? Or when was the last time you spoke to somebody? Or how long has it been stuck in this particular place? If those are the questions that you're having to ask of your team, then you're being reactive, and so you're always on the back foot. But also you're preventing yourselves from just getting deeper into those accounts and fighting for a seat at the table with your customer.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about, so in your team, does the CS team, do they manage everything from sales, the fulfillment, as you were, into the onboarding, into customer success? Do they own that entire journey, or have you got the team organized into different areas? Tell us.
So we have we have 3 roles in the team. Again, it's a pretty small team at the moment, and inevitably when you're a small team, people tend to have to be a little bit more of a generalist, and as your teams grow, you can then double down and split accountabilities and responsibilities. But essentially, we have customer success managers, we have onboarding specialists, and we have support specialists. Support specialists, they look after our they're their first point of contact via ticketing via Zendesk. They work on all of the support materials that we put together for our customers. They'll kind of run reports, set up users, and support both our clients, the law firms, and are an internal resource for us in terms of taking that stuff off the hands of the rest of the team.
Mm-hmm.
On the other side, we have the customer success managers who, they will come in as the deals start to close, and they're accountable for the relationship. But what we try to do with our customer success managers is be very clear about what their role is with the customer, and they're there not to be the person that does everything for the customer. They're the person to kind of really understand what the customer is trying to achieve and be the architect of that customer's success. So, it's often talk about the two differences, which is that within customer success, you have people that are architects, and they're the ones that typically will be accountable for the revenue, and they need to be have certainly some form of accountability metrics and targets, and they'll be accountable for the customer relationship, and they need to work with the customers to design what success is going to look like, and they build the house, to design the house. And then we have the support team, so the onboarding team and the support team are there to then come in and build that and project manage the completion of that house. So the other team that we have is the onboarding team, and then when we typically in the first few months with our customers, like a lot of companies and yourselves included, the onboarding team come in and will work very, very closely with the customer to get them up and running with a platform, to get the data flowing that they need. In a way, our onboarding team are also quite unique. They need some of the skills of a customer success manager, because they're also working closely with the law firms to get their connections set up as well. So they're doing a relationship management on that side. And for that to be successful, you've got to be very clear around the roles and responsibilities within your team and how you pick that up. So we've been we've done a lot of work to map out the roles and responsibilities and accountabilities for the individuals in the team, and to make sure that people understand that we've all got our own wheelhouse, if you like, but we also operate within a wider team, and it's important that we're all coming together to drive the success of our customers as a unit.
Yeah, because it is a complex thing that they do when they're working, in setting up customers, because you've got your customer and then obviously a network of law firms that your particular client is using. I can imagine that's they're quite the the conductor of the orchestra, as it were, having to deal with so many stakeholders. So we work with a number of companies that kind of have that model, or they've got a platform with a network, or they've got product and partners. Are there some kind of fundamental things that you've done, or some tactics that you've employed, or some training that you've done to allow the team to manage that better?
Yeah. So I think it's very important to look at skill sets that aren't necessarily typical within that field, and but are applicable within the teams when they're trying to do that. So the stuff that we've done, for example, is look at, can we bring in sales trainers and coaches to do some work with those teams. Especially what you find with support teams and those people that, if you think about the architects versus the builders, if you're a builder, you tend to be quite practical. You want to come in and you want to, here's the facts, and here's what we're going to do here, and we've got to do this piece here, and we've got to do this piece here. For us, because we also have this element of having to deal with relationships, we've invested in sales training, because we need to, these guys need to be able to speak to people and have an impact very, very quickly. So if we're speaking to a law firm for the first time about connecting to their time entry data and sharing it with a client, that can be quite uncomfortable for a law firm, because there's a lot of questions they're going to have. They're going to worry about security. They're going to worry about, is my client doesn't trust me? All of these factors. And so we've invested in kind of the sales training in this piece, so that those teams can be understand how to run meetings in an effective way, into how to manage their messaging, and how to deal with objection handling in a very clear way, so they can get those firms to where we need them to be, which is, yes, okay, this all makes sense, happy to do this, and then let's move to the technical phase of the implementation.
Yeah, I mean, I think navigating those challenging conversations and understanding how to prepare for them, nullify objections, or make sure that they don't happen because of the way that you frame things
Yeah.
is tremendously important in customer success right now. Cool. So, looking at kind of the business impact specifically of a couple of different things. So, if we start with customer onboarding, you've worked in SaaS and startups that have gone through the various stages of scaling, some hypergrowth businesses, you've seen Series A's through to D's. What, for those maybe uninitiated, what's the connection between good onboarding and financial performance typically for the companies that you've worked in?
I think it's absolutely critical. So that probably the number one driver, especially if you have a platform that, you know, if your onboarding is not a simple case of, right, here's a login, we'll do a training session, bang, you're off and running. And I think in the B2B space, there's not very many of those. Certainly not many that at the kind of the level that needs a big, large customer success organization.
Yeah.
And the primary driver to that is around time to value. So from the point that the customers effectively, their contract is effective, to the point where they're starting to get value from the platform, if you're not delivering on that within the first few months, then the risk exponentially expands with every month that you've not got to that point of delivering value.
Yeah.
And so part of it is you have to understand, in many ways, you have to understand, well, hopefully there's lots of different ways you can deliver value. And actually throughout the length of your relationship, you're constantly finding new ways to derive more and more value into within those organizations. But it's important that we focus on, well, what's that first piece that we can get in front of the client and get them starting to do something that's going to help their business and help them achieve those goals. Yeah. And so that, in order to do that, so for us, it's around getting the first law firm connected and getting data flowing into the platform so the client can access it and get in there. And if you're dealing with a client who maybe is working with a dozen or so law firms, they're going to have different amounts of spends with across those different law firms. They're going to have different priorities. They're going to have more work with one with another. If you can't understand where you need to put your resources to have the fastest and highest level of impact as quickly as possible, you're going to get into difficult conversations. You're going to get your CSMs are going to be constantly having to deliver bad news, which things aren't there. You're not going to be able to make commitments to your customers and then ultimately live up to those commitments if you don't understand the metrics and the timelines and the processes and the steps that customer has to go through to be impactful. Yeah. And this is ultimately, I think, and this is why, why we're implementing task feed. It's because it means that we know that you have to be pretty formulaic. You have to know that as much as possible, this is going to be steps that every customer is going to go through are going to be familiar, and you have to know when you're moving away from the baseline that you're aiming for. Yep. So when we're obviously in the process of going through and getting that up and running with task feed, yep. And previously the way that was managed is through using Jira and Jira tickets, and the process was pretty good. We had the steps we knew that we had to go through, clients had to go through, but we're having some big challenges around visibility because it was used by a small team, and Jira is it's a dev's tool. It's not necessarily, expecting a salesperson to be able to go in and look at a Jira board to see which law firms we're connected to and not is just never going to happen. Mm-hmm. And so for us, it was important that we didn't want to be in situations where individuals were having to ask somebody, can you tell me where we are with this particular thing? That information had to be visible, because the questions it needs to be asking is what you're doing about this thing that's not where it needs to be, and what help do you need to get there. So for us is the key point. The first one is about, we have to get all of that in Salesforce, because if ultimately from pretty much all of the commercial stuff within our business, Salesforce is the single source of data for us. It's the system of record for everything that we're doing. And then what the reason we brought in TaskFeed and started working with you guys is because we knew that a lot of the stuff that we had sitting in Jira could be very easily replicated in Salesforce through using TaskFeed. But more importantly, it meant that we could then start to use tools that people are all familiar with to add that additional layer of information. So if an onboarding is overrunning, then how can we have a dialogue between the CSM and the onboarding exec to just clarify what the actions, what the steps are? How can we see all of the conversation and dialogue and the outreach that's gone on with the client? How can we ensure that if we're missing deadlines, that we're then using that to trigger something to then say, for example, update a scorecard in Gainsight to allow us to understand that there's risk being introduced into that account, and so on. And for us, it's a critical part to making our business work and to making our teams more effective.
I'm calling because, you know, we, like you guys, everyone is doing their own strategy and replanning and reviews of executions and account risks and account growth. And Salesforce now for me is like that rational friend that never lies to you, or shouldn't lie to you if the information's correct. So it's amazing how much we rely on it, and I know you guys do as well. But I think it's, as you say, it's that dialogue that you can have off the back of the information. The information in and of itself can be interesting. You know, if there's a delay, if it's 65 days versus 30 days, like all of these things are useful. But I think sometimes it's like, it's the dialogue that you have around that, and what are we going to do about it? That conversation should happen faster as a result. And I think sometimes that's underappreciated. A lot of the time it's like, I could be useful getting this information somewhere else, but it's like, that's great, but what are you actually going to do about it?
One of the things that we talk quite a lot about is, so for us is we talk a lot about relationship capital. So both internally in terms of what's the relationship capital that we have with our clients, that we have with the law firms that we're working with, but also trying to understand what the relationship capital is with our clients and the law firms they're working with. So if we have to be able to demonstrate. We have to be able to demonstrate to our clients that we've done everything that we can do within our powers to move, say, an onboarding forward, so of getting a law firm connected. And if we and we have to be very, very wary that our clients are going to be very cautious about spending their own relationship capital that they have with their law firms, because these are, you know, when you're working, law firms are key partners for big businesses. They're doing very, very critical work. And, you know, you and I were talking earlier about when you've got a good partner in a law firm, it makes things work really, really well. And so we have to ensure that if we're going to ask our customers to spend some of that relationship capital with their law firms to make things move forwards, that we can demonstrate to them that we've done everything in our power to do that, and there's a justified reason for them to doing it. We're not just asking them to do it as a get out for making our lives any easier. And so we can't do that if you don't have that information. If you're not able, if a CSM is not able to look quickly within Salesforce and see that that we've done everything within our power, and they can articulate that back to the customer and ask them to go ahead and perhaps push somebody to have a slightly uncomfortable conversation, you know, then we're going to lose credibility with our customers quite quickly.
And what have you found in terms of, because one of the things I know you've done in TaskFeed, and you've done this you did this in PatSnap as well, you know, you create these templates for the work, right? The work that you deliver, you know, playbooks for onboarding, project plans, whatever people want to call them. I think talk to me a little bit about kind of like, how does that help actually with onboarding new people into the team, right? So when people join the business, either in a CS role or in an onboarding specialist role, how does having those templates help you with their onboarding and ramping them into the company?
It's a very good question. It's in many ways, it's what you're doing with that is one of the hardest things when you're starting a new job is, especially when you're, you know, quite often the people working on onboarding roles tend to be fairly recent graduates or still early on in their careers. And having the confidence to turn around and ask somebody, I don't know what I'm doing or what I'm supposed to be doing next, is difficult for them to do. And so if you can make it as easy as possible for them to understand what the next step is that they need to take and where they should be prioritizing their time, where they should be focusing on what they're doing, you're going to make their life so much easier and make their job so much easier. And so if you're having, if you can just say that you can reference previous, you've got all of the records of, say, a previous onboarding, so they can easily go in and understand, oh, I see how this played out and what the steps were and what the stories were. If you can help guide them through who the stakeholders are in an easy manner and who they need to be talking to and what the next step, next action they can do in an easy manner, and it's all in front of them, then it just makes stuff so much easier, not having to kind of spend all this time shadowing and over explaining stuff and so on. You create reference points and models to make things very, very scalable.
Well, as you're aware, one of your old team joined our team, and part of their onboarding was using using the product internally to set up their own onboarding plans. And we actually showed the Apperio project as an example of one where I think you recently launched, or you're launching this week, of like, these are the things that have happened. Because it's actually quite nice to show this is what should happen, this is what has happened, and you can see what's being completed and the timelines and stuff that's moved around, and these dependencies can change. I think I heard a really interesting thing in a similar conversation with another company this week was the ability to use sort of the reasons for delays to better inform either how you run the setup or how you build the product. So, for example, making it easier for customers to do testing, or making it easier for them to know where they are in this process. I was telling you earlier that we're in the process, I hope, of setting up a new bank for our business, and the onboarding experience has been, from a customer's perspective, for me, awful, because I didn't know where I was in this process. It was like forward, back, up, down again. Have you, given the platform that you have, do you see in the future that you'll be able to use data from what's happening in the setup to better inform things that could be sharpened to make that process run more smoothly?
Absolutely. So one of the big reasons why we brought TaskFeed in when I first joined is it was easy to kind of see the steps that the people were going through, but it was very, very hard to ask the question of where are we repeatedly falling down, where have we got blocks, problems and issues, and you can't answer those questions until you've got the information and the data that tells you that. So if we see that a certain phase within an implementation and onboarding, customers are always missing deadlines, or things are always falling back, then you've got to start drilling into that and digging into that and start to understand why. It should never be a case of that we've got this nice repeatable template and we've be so precious about the process that you don't sit back and look at what's working well and what's failing, and to make those decisions, you've got to have that information in front of you.
Cool. Well, look, Sean, super interesting to talk to you and catch up. I mean, lots of really interesting strategic ideas around kind of how you frame communications, around specific tactics to employ with developing CSMs. I particularly like, the fact that sales training in many ways is kind of necessary now to navigate some of those challenging conversations. The ongoing importance of culture, I think, is one. And again, just that relentless focus on kind of keeping the customer at the heart of the conversation, the narrative, and everything that you do. So super helpful. Thank you ever so much for joining us. Final question. What is your favorite book from the bookshelf to your left? That's quite a nice little collection you've got there. Or any interesting books you'd recommend to our viewers?
Well, you know what? So, I mean, it's quite funny because all of our books are in storage. When we moved in, we put all of our books in storage, and then we bought loads more books, and then this is the bookshelf that
hasn't been read.
Has been done. I'll tell you what, I'll show you. So, my wife runs a street food business. A little plug for her business, which is called Happy Hill Kitchen. She's on Twitter and Instagram.
Happy Hill Kitchen.
Happy Hill Kitchen. Yeah. And so she does kind of modern Caribbean street food.
Cool.
And this is her favourite book, which is all about goat, from a guy called James Wetlaw, who does what are they called? Cabrito, which is a goat farm, a couple of restaurants, and they run a goat farm and they sell goat meat onto the market, and they're big advocates of goat meat. So this is the book probably I'd highlight to you. And apparently it's a very good read. I've not read it myself, but my wife is always referring back to it.
All right. Well, thank you, Mrs. Smith, for your culinary recommendation via Mr. Smith. Sean, brilliant to chat to you. Thanks ever so much.
Been a pleasure. Cheers, Jonathan.
All the best. Cheers.